In this video, we'll be going over section 2.2, solving quadratics. We will be looking at two methods, taking the square root and completing the square. This video will be part 1. There will be a second part where we talk about quadratic formula. Quadratics are equations in the form ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, where the key is this x squared term. Right. Quadratics have the leading term being x squared. The first method we're going to look at is solving by taking the square root. Solve by taking the square root. All right. First of all, when we solve by taking the square root, we're going to need quadratics that are in the form ax squared plus c equals 0. Notice that we're missing this bx term. You can think of b being 0. So if we have a quadratic that only has the quadratic term, the squared term, and no linear term, we're going to be able to solve by taking the square root, and you're going to see this process is pretty straightforward. In this case, b is equal to 0. There is no linear term. All right, first step, step 1. Isolate the variable. What I'm saying here is, let's examine the equation 4x squared minus 36 is equal to 0. Well, you see again, b is equal to 0. There is no bx term. All right. So step 1, I want to get this variable by itself. I will begin by adding 36 to both sides of the equation. All right. The 36 cancels with the 36 to leave 4x squared on the left. 0 plus 36 is 36 on the right. All right, now I still need to isolate this variable, so I need to undo this 4 times. I will divide both sides by 4. When I divide both sides by 4, I'm left with x squared 4, that is 9. That completes step 1, isolating the variable. We know x squared is equal to 9. Step 2. Take the square root. I'm simply going to recopy this line here so we can see that the flow of this problem. And if you were working this on your paper, it wouldn't be necessary to recopy it. Take the square root. I'm now going to take the square root of the left and the right side. Well, what is the square root of 9? Well, hopefully you remember from our last class that we called this 3 because 3 squared is equal to 9. We call this the second root. It's an implied 2 index there. But the solutions to this statement, x squared equal 9, are both positive and negative 3. That is, when we say what is the square root of 9, what we are actually asking for is what is the positive square root or the principal square root. Truly, we should say that the solutions to this equation are both x equals positive and negative 3, and I hope to be able to show that. Substituting 3 into this equation, 3 squared is 9. Substituting negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So if you just simply see the square root symbol, we are asking about the positive square root. But know that indeed 3 squared is 9 and negative 3 squared is 9. So we have two solutions to this equation. We could write it in this form, x equals plus and minus 3. I could write it as x equals 3 comma negative 3, or I could say that x is a member, an element of, you read this symbol as an element of the set 3 and negative 3. These are 3 separate ways to write this, and any of these are satisfactory. Note this is not a parentheses, it is a bracket. All right. And if we substitute 3 and negative 3, we'll see it satisfies our original. 3 squared is 9. 4 times 9, 36. 36 minus 36 is 0. Negative 3 squared, also 9. Times 4 is 36. Minus 36 is 0. So any of these statements, these are all solutions. All right. Next, solve by completing the square. Solve by complete the square. All right. Let us examine the equation 3x squared minus 9x minus 12. Completing the square is my favorite method for solving quadratics because, number one, it always works. Factoring won't work very often. Taking the square root won't work very often, but this method, completing the square, will work very often. And to me, it has benefits over the quadratic formula because you don't have to memorize that quadratic formula. And this, completing the square, is where the quadratic formula is derived from. So this is a nice mathematical process that will always get the job done for you. And it also has utility as we advance in mathematics, doing some other things with conic sections. All right. So when we are completing the square, the first step is going to be to collect the variables on the left and the constants on the right. Step 1. Collect variables on left and constants on the right. All right, so step 1 in this case, we have our variables x squared and x. We want to keep that on the left. We want to get this constant minus 12 on the right. So we're going to add 12 to both sides, adding 12 to both the left and the right. When we do, this cancels, leaving 3x squared minus 9x. The 12s cancel, and we have 0 plus 12 or 12 on the right hand side. We have successfully completed step 1. All right. Step 2. Divide by a. Divide by a. A, as we discussed earlier, a is the coefficient of the x squared. So we are going to now divide by that number. In this case, it's 3, so we can divide by 3. If the number here is 1, you can omit that step because dividing by 1 doesn't change any value. So now I'm going to divide everything by this value 3. Dividing by 3 right across the board. When I do, 3 divides 3 to leave x squared. Negative 9 divide 3, that's minus 3x. And 12 divided by 3, that is 4. That is step 2. All right. Step 3. We're going to add what I call the box number. Add the box number. So at this time, I'm going to take this statement, x squared minus 3x equal 4, and I'm going to add a box on both sides. X squared minus 3x plus box on the left equals 4 plus box on the right. Whatever we add to one side, we add to the other. Okay. The question is, what is this box number? Well, the box number is simply going to be half of this number squared. Half of negative 3 is negative 1.5. Negative 1.5 squared is 2.25. We're going to add that to the left and right. So in this case, 2.25, 2 1/4, goes in both the left and the right. This box number, the box is equal to 1/2 of our B number squared. This is B. Half of -3 is 1.5. Negative 1.5 quantity squared is 2.25. Step 4. Factor left side. And what's going to be very easy about factoring this left side, because of this box number, this left side is always going to factor as a perfect square trinomial. So factoring here is simply going to be writing this as the square root of the first term first, and 1/2 of this term here. Half of -3 is minus 1.5 quantity squared. Over here we're simply going to sum 4 plus 2.25 is 6.25. How is this equal to this? Well, we know, you're not writing this down, this is just over here in your sandbox. Just thinking about this. X minus 1.5 quantity squared is equal to x minus 1.5 times x minus 1.5. Well, x times x is x squared. X times minus 1.5 is minus 1.5 x. Now the inside 2, minus 1.5x. And the last 2, negative 1.5. Negative 1.5 is a plus 2 1/4. Well, negative 1.5 and negative 1.5 yields negative 3x. So we can see that this equation here is the same as that one. And this, when you correctly add this box number, this factoring will work like that every time. You simply take the square root of the first term first, and you take 1/2 of this term. All right, half of -3 is a minus 1.5. Okay. The final step, step 5. Take square root and solve. All right. So now we're going to employ what we saw previously about the square root. I'm going to take the square root of my left side here, which is x minus 1.5 quantity squared. I'm going to take the square root of that, and I'm going to take the square root of 6 1/4. Well, the square root of something squared, it simply comes out. Much like previously, the square root of x squared was x. Same thing here. I'm taking the square root of this squared binomial. This binomial simply comes out. We have x minus 1.5. Well, the square root of 6.25, that is 2.5. But we're going to use the plus and the minus, 2.5. Much like previously, we said the square root of 9 was positive and negative 3. Here, the square root of 6.25 is plus and minus 2.25. We need both of those statements. This now becomes two equations. Two different equations. One is x minus 1.5 is positive 2.25, positive 2.5, and separately, x minus 1.5 is a negative 2.5. Here, adding 1.5 to both sides, you get that x is 4. And here, adding 1.5 to both sides, you get that x is a -1. And we're going to take these values and substitute them back into our original equation. Substituting 4 squared is 16, 3 times 16 is 48. 9 times 4 is 36. 48 minus 36 is 12. 12 minus 12 is 0. X equal 4 is a solution. -1. -1 quantity squared is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 minus 9 times -1 will be a positive 3. That's 3 plus 3 is 12. 12 minus 12 is 0. -1 works as well. So these are both solutions. I could say that statement that x equals 4 and -1, x equals 4 comma -1 are solutions. And that is my answer. That concludes this video.